So welcome again. Today's session that's part of Faculty Leading the Change is on emotional intelligence in the online classroom to create a culture of caring. We have Dr. John Ford with us today who will be presenting this information. Dr. Ford is a contributing faculty member in the College of Health Sciences and Public Policy. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to you, Dr. Ford. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I just noticed I'm wearing the same sweater that I'm wearing in my profile pic that was made a few years ago. So that was not planned. But I wanted to just take a few moments to talk about my background. In addition to teaching at Walden, I'm an alum of Walden, the PhD in public health program. I have over 25 years of teaching experience. I've taught online, hybrid, face-to-face, international field trips for many, many years. And I also was the director of the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga's Teaching and Learning Center for 10 years. So I have a lot of experience teaching myself and also assisting faculty with teaching. And one of the topics that I've been recently kind of diving into is emotional intelligence. So I'm happy to be here today to share more information about that. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. I'm going to try to keep my eye on the chat. So if you don't hear from me immediately, I might be missing it, but we will get to it. Let's first talk about what is emotional intelligence. It's been around for a while. It was first kind of published in 1990. And this is the framework of emotional intelligence. So there's 4 parts to it: perceiving, accurately appraising and expressing emotion, accessing and or generating feelings when they facilitate thought, understanding emotions and emotional knowledge, and regulating emotions to promote emotional and intellectual growth. I want to mention that emotional intelligence, which is sometimes called EQ, is a set of skills. What's different than IQ is that it can be learned and it can be improved upon. And that's what we will focus on as we go through this presentation. Is all of us have some level of emotional intelligence, but there's always room for growth. And so as we teach more and interact, both in the workplace and outside of it, we can improve emotional intelligence, which is directly correlated with all types of success. In 1997, so just a few years from when this was first introduced, a 4-branch model was described, which is a little more simple than this slide, which includes perceiving, using, understanding, and managing emotions. And all of those can, when done well, can predict levels of success in relationships. Next slide, please. In 1995, Daniel Goleman published his model of emotional intelligence, and he's probably the most well-known academic related to emotional intelligence. He's written more than 10 books. If you are interested in knowing more about emotional intelligence after this webinar, you could visit his website, which is danielgoleman.info. He's on LinkedIn. You can follow his social media posts. He recently published a new book just this year, if you want to take a look at that. But so it's been around for a while. His model includes know your emotions, manage your emotions as best as you can, motivate yourself, and people can use emotional intelligence to guide their actions and thinking. And that's what that means with motivating yourself. Recognizing and understanding other people's emotions, and then managing relationships and others' emotions. There are emotional intelligence tests out there, so you can go online and Google it, and there's tests that you can take online that help measure your current state of emotional intelligence. However, for Daniel Goleman, he's really only been involved in one type of assessment. It's called emotional and social competence inventory, which is explained on his webpage. So that's what he officially affiliates with. So if you are interested in knowing more about your own emotional intelligence, that would be something to take a look at. Next slide. Also, I'll mention I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. You probably notice I have a Southern accent, so hopefully you can understand me okay. Emotional intelligence in the classroom. So that's what we're here, to focus on. So if we think about it objectively, instructors routinely provide a couple things in the classroom already. Our expertise in the subject area and our knowledge and application of teaching and learning methods, the pedagogy of it. But we should also consider, and I'm sure many of us do, showing emotional intelligence, because as I mentioned before, it is associated with improved success of relationships. So what does that mean? Recognize and respond to the feelings of both yourself and your students. Encourage an emotional state in your students that's conducive to learning. And it is positive emotions that are associated with learning. The feelings of your own emotions must be managed first before you can improve relationships by working with other people's emotions. So that's an important point to make. I have some notes here. Often I don't have notes, but I wanted to make sure that I included everything. EI, emotional intelligence, is cross-cutting. It benefits any subject that you're teaching. Instructors can model emotional intelligence to their students. And not only can you develop your own for your own benefit, but you're also modeling to your students how emotional intelligence can improve their learning and improve their relationships with other students. Instructors with high emotional intelligence challenge their students so they can grow. I just learned a new term yesterday. I'm in a leadership cohort with our local county Department of Education. And the K through 12 teachers here in Hamilton County, Tennessee, are asked to be, and I've never heard this term before, warm defenders. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Warm demanders. Warm demanders, and you may have heard of this, but this was new to me. This is a teaching approach that can help promote emotional intelligence in the classroom by creating a supportive yet challenging environment that encourages students to engage. So you're building trust and relationships with students while still holding high standards. And I think that's important. We don't need to reduce the rigor of the course to provide an environment that students are comfortable in, they trust you, they're willing to share. And so when they're comfortable, they tend to learn more. Okay, next slide, please. Before we go any further, we're going to talk about these 4 quadrants of Goleman's model. I would like for you to reflect for a moment. So please think of a great teacher that you had as a student. What words and or phrases describe what was good about them? So if you don't mind, just take a moment and make a few notes, and we're going to circle back to this at the end of the presentation. Think of a great teacher that you had as a student. What words, phrases describe what was good about them? And I saw a note pop up in the chat. Yes, we teach our teachers to be warm demanders. That's great. Joy and high expectations can and must coexist in classrooms. That's great to hear. Okay. Hopefully you've had a moment to take down a few notes. Goleman has 4 quadrants in his model of emotional intelligence. So let's go through those. Next slide, please. First is the self-awareness quadrant. This involves being aware of your emotional state as an instructor. I mean, and this applies to all facets of your life. It doesn't have to necessarily just apply to online teaching, but it can be your role as an advisor to students. It can be your role as a family member. If you work other places like I do, I supervise a team of folks here, how I interact with my team and build trust. Aware of your emotional state and how it impacts how you interact with other people. Recognize your behaviors when you're in that emotional state and how it impacts other people. And recognize how others influence your emotional state. So let's think about that for a moment, all of these components of self-awareness. You know, and I think about that when I'm reading my emails, because I might get an email that I get irritated about or makes me angry initially. So being aware of that and stepping away from it. Let's not respond right away. Let's let it process. Maybe I'm reading into it too much. And with students, perhaps I've had students that email a lot. And perhaps I think, you know, they should really read the syllabus to find some of these answers. But it's important on how we interact with students at those moments, because if they need help, it's important that we don't respond in a way that might make them not trust us or be scared of us, not want to ask questions. So how can we motivate them to find their own answers, for example? Okay, next slide. Self-awareness was the first quadrant. The second quadrant we will discuss is social awareness. So this is outside. This is how others interact with you, hearing what the other person is really saying. And you may have heard of the term active listening. To listen, not to just respond, but to understand what the other person is saying. Actively processing and seeking to understand the meaning and intent behind their words, being fully present when someone is interacting with you, show interest, ask questions, paraphrase and restate what you think you heard. So that can work in a variety of ways. With online teaching, it's a little more challenging because we're often communicating through announcements, through student feedback, through our posts and discussion boards. So it might be if you have like office hours that are Zoom meetings that they can come into, that would be a way that you can hear directly from the students outside of them writing emails or responding to you in a written format. Care what others are going through. So that's the empathy part. And awareness of social cues. So again, that's a little more difficult in an online setting that might be mostly asynchronous. But, you know, taking time to process what's been communicated and responding accordingly in a way that's warm, that is caring, that is empathetic, so that you develop this culture of caring way of interacting with students. So, you know, a couple things you can think about. How can you best meet the needs of students? So this is caring what others are going through. How can you improve your listening? If you were to step into the shoes of students, would your perspective on things be different? And I try to do that. So if I'm getting a lot of questions about an assignment, I think, okay, the instructions may not be clear. That is a cue to me that I need to explain it better. So perhaps I need to do an announcement and just say, you know, I'm getting some questions about this. I recognize that I might not have explained it well. So let's try again. Let's explain it in a different way. I think it's really important to let people know, hey, I make mistakes. I'm not perfect. It's okay to make mistakes. I'm acknowledging it, and let me give it another try. Okay, next slide, please. Self-management. So this is, you have these emotions. Sometimes they're strong emotions. So what can I do to manage those so that we stay professional, we continue to develop a positive relationship with one another? So one is to keep impulses in check. We all have them. It's okay. We have emotions. We're not robots. But it's all in how you respond. You do have control over that. And there's this saying that I really like, and I often put it on Post-it notes so that I can remind myself. It's called power in the pause. You don't have to respond immediately necessarily, unless it's an urgent emergency situation. So if you get an email from a student and it kind of irritates you, you don't have to respond then. Wait a few hours, sleep on it, respond the next day. Keep your impulses in check so that we stay calm, we respond in the best way possible. We cannot successfully manage emotions in anyone else without first managing our own. It's kind of like that, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you can try to help others. Think of it in that way. Act in alignment with your values. And power in the pause helps with that, because sometimes if we have a knee-jerk reaction, we respond immediately, we may not act in alignment with our values at that moment. So pausing, taking some time to reflect, how can I best respond to this situation, can help ensure that you're aligning with your own values. And also helps you manage change well, so that you can be adaptable to something that's changing, be transparent, and promote a positive outlook on any given change or situation. And we all dealt with that with COVID-19 response, for example. Lots of examples of things that we had to make adjustments to. And if we stay calm, we take the time that we need, it can help ensure that we are managing ourselves in the best way possible. Okay, next slide. Relationship management quadrant. So if we can manage ourselves well, then we can try to take actions to manage a relationship with another student or a class as a whole or coworkers. So this involves attempting to handle conflict effectively. And of course, this is subjective. None of us are perfect. We use the tools that we have to manage conflict as best that we can. And having high emotional intelligence can help us with that. So having empathy, trying to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, all of those things that we already talked about can assist us in handling conflict effectively. Not jumping to conclusions, not making assumptions. And that's something that I work with my early career staff here in the epidemiology department on a lot. Because I think with social media, some of us have developed this way of looking at something and immediately thinking that is true, perhaps. So let's think of things critically. Let's look at the information. Let's think of how we can respond well so that we handle a situation effectively. And one way to do that is clearly expressing information and ideas, being as clear as possible, as transparent as possible. And again, here's empathy coming up. Use empathy to help manage interactions. So what is empathy? It's the understanding of feelings, needs, and concerns of others. So again, that active listening comes into play. So listen, not to respond, but to understand, so that we can better understand what a student's concerns are, for example, so that we can effectively respond. So we can think of it in terms of being a coach. See yourself as a coach to motivate the team and resolve conflicts. So again, looking at it from a positive perspective, and being nice isn't necessarily the best way to manage relationships, because we do have to manage conflict. And one of the examples I was thinking of was, if your class has a group project and they're having some issues within the group, how can we model emotional intelligence so that they can try to manage those conflicts on their own? Now, I realize that at a certain point, it does escalate, that sometimes instructors have to get involved, but this might be a really good way or opportunity to talk about emotional intelligence in your class, so that students are also aware of the different aspects, the framework, the model of emotional intelligence, and how they can use that tool to work well in groups, for example. Okay, next slide, please. Benefits of teaching with emotional intelligence. Student emotions have an impact on their learning. We all get course evaluations. There's Rate Your Professor, and students often refer to emotions when they're describing teaching, both positive and negative emotions. But it's positive emotional states that have been shown to be associated with good teaching and learning in general. You know, there's always exceptions to things. And I think what we sometimes find is that students might be upset about something when they complete the evaluation. So it might not be a good overall evaluation of the course in itself. But that's something that I have worked on at another university, is evaluation of teaching, and how can we address some of the known biases in course evaluations. I did find an article just today that was published this year about a comparison of Rate My Professor and departmental course evaluation results. And they specifically looked at emotions, words tied to emotions, and percent of words representing each emotion in this study that and I won't go into the details, but oftentimes students use emotions when describing their experiences in a class. So some of the words that they mentioned were anger, disgust, fear, sadness. So those are negative, of course, but some positive ones, anticipation, joy, trust. And what they found is there is a significant difference between course evaluations that are official, given by the university, and Rate My Professor. So Rate My Professor tends to have more negative emotions that are expressed in those comments compared to the traditional evaluations. So just something to think about, that we all have emotions, and those are tied to experiences and to learning. So we want to have the best experience possible in our courses, to have positive emotional states. Okay, next slide, please. Let's talk about the learning environment a bit. So for students, the state that they are in is an important factor in their learning. The state they are in is a collection of emotions one is feeling. So we want them to be in a learning state, a state in which they can learn. In a learning state, you experience those feelings that are more conducive to learning: being valued, safe, curious, relaxed, engaged, and motivated. And of those, Having psychological safety has been shown to have the biggest impact on a student's state and their ability to learn, that they feel safe. So it's not the physical safety, especially in online courses, it's psychological safety. So how do you create an environment that is psychologically safe? Well, first of all, let's talk about what that means. It means that your students believe it's okay to ask questions, to make mistakes without being punished or singled out, made fun of. And when it's safe, when they feel it's safe, they will share ideas, they will collaborate, they will communicate with you more. They feel safe, so they are more engaged and they learn more as a benefit. So how can we do that? Well, it takes some time, and it really needs to start from the very first announcement in the course. And when you get student questions, answering them promptly and respectfully, asking for student input, encouraging them to share information, being transparent. There should be no surprises in a course. There's no better way to break trust when you're teaching a class than to have a surprise that doesn't positively affect them. So if you're changing the assignments, you're changing the weight of assignments, which I don't think happens at Walden because we have these courses are designed, they're developed, they're reviewed, and we use consistent syllabi. So I don't think that happens much at Walden, but it might at other institutions. So those are all things. So think about that. How could you create a more psychologically safe environment in the classroom? Okay, next slide, please. So let's talk about that a little bit more. How do we create this culture of caring? How can students feel safe or more safe rather than perhaps threatened or uncomfortable or not sure of themselves? How can they feel more trustful rather than suspicious or not sure about the instructor? How can they feel more challenged, motivated to complete a task rather than pressured or overwhelmed? How can we motivate them rather than them becoming disengaged? How can we have a classroom where they are curious rather than bored? How can we engage them more? And that's something I've been thinking about a lot. I'm a Walden alum. I graduated 10 years ago. And so I started my coursework 15 years ago. And a lot of the strategies are the same in online learning. So we have our discussion, at least in the field that I'm in. And this is across institutions, not just at Walden, but discussion boards, posting content. You might have some quizzes, tests online. Those are so common now. How can we make adjustments? What new tools can we use to engage the students more so that they are curious? They really want to get online. They want to look at the content. They want to be engaged rather than it's a checklist to get through. And how can we create an environment in which they feel valued rather than undervalued, perhaps? So, I think about discussion boards. How can we make comments in which they feel valued, that their contribution is valued? And I think faculty in general think about that. They're going into the classroom a few times a week, making some responses to what students have posted already to encourage them to, we can be curious too. We can ask questions too. And that we're modeling that behavior. So modeling is important. And then what we ask of students is also important. Communicating frequently and clearly. can help with these things. But while we're here, and we just have one more slide, and then we'll go back to the question I asked you at the beginning and have time for questions and discussion. If you would, in the chat, put some things that you're thinking about as you look at this slide. What do you do already to create an environment that's safe, where students can trust you, where students are challenged but not overwhelmed? What do you do to motivate students? How do you make them curious? And how do you help them feel valued? Let's just take a couple minutes to see what kinds of things you come up with. Yeah, so there was a comment giving students the benefit of the doubt. Yes, 100% agree. And that's related to not making assumptions or jumping to conclusions. When a student is having trouble or misses something, you know, giving them a chance, giving them a do-over, within reason, of course. Feeling of trust and safe to take risks. Yes, feeling safe so they can take risks, and it's okay to make mistakes. Micah says, I send 2 announcements per week to make sure they know what to do. Feeling challenged rather than pressured. Give student opportunities to resubmit assignments. I do that too, because sometimes they just completely miss the mark. And it could be that they didn't understand. Maybe the instructions were not clear to them. Create shells of the assignments. Cheryl, does that mean like a template so that they have a better idea of what the expectations are, perhaps? Micah said, remind them over and over again that I'm here to support, provide my office hours and phone number weekly. Wow, that's great. That's really great. Lida, I always let them know how I recognize that they have a lot going on in their lives outside of school. When they slip, I try to connect them on the phone. Okay. Years ago, I thought this would take a lot of time, but throughout the years, I have realized that it does not take much time, and it really helps my students feel valued. That is a great, great suggestion. Team meetings, phone calls, sharing with students what they have done well. I do let them know I think their input is valuable, and I encourage to move forward even more so. I simply always let them know I think they are the best. Nice. Those are really great examples. Oh, I do tend to call them rock stars. That's nice. You know, I've gone to some teaching conferences, and there have been discussions about office hours. And this might apply more to undergraduate students, because I also teach at other institutions some undergrad courses that students don't really understand what office hours are. And that they might think that that's when you're in your office, but you might be busy with other things. So there have been some ideas about how can we rename office hours so that students better understand what those are. So student hours, for example, student time. There are ways that we can explain that so that, I mean, office hours goes back decades, right? So maybe it's a little outdated. Maybe we need to think about, how do we ensure students know this is time for you. I'm here. You can ask me questions. You're not bothering me. Those kinds of things. Just something to think about. Okay, so let's go to the last slide. Oh, actually, there's one more after this, so my apologies. So some things that I had thought of: establishing clear goals, providing feedback, and as specific as possible so that they do feel that this is for them and you're not just copying and pasting, although, that's okay. But also trying to add a little bit to that that's specific to them. I found that giving student choices can be really helpful. And we're all like that. We're human beings. We like to have some flexibility and some choices. So if you're able to integrate that into your course, that might be something to consider. Make sure that a task aligns with a skill so that they understand why they're doing it. So it doesn't seem like busy work. They're just checking a box, but they realize, okay, we're doing this because an outcome of the course is related to this task. Giving them rewards, and it sounds like you guys already do that with some really great comments.
Hey there, I just wanted to jump in and make sure the audio wasn't on my end. I'm going to.
Okay, so thinking about all of these models, quadrants of emotional intelligence, what can you do to further develop your practice? How can you give students the opportunity to engage more in your course? And that's something that I'm always thinking about, just to keep them on track, help them feel a part of something so that they stay on track, so that they can finish their course and their program. The second one is more for in-person courses, or maybe if you do Zooms with students, how can you use student names in the course? So call them by name. You might do some call outs in an announcement, for example, like as Sarah said in the discussion, these are some things that were great takeaways on this topic. I try to keep track of those so that I try to mention all the students by the end of the semester. It takes a little bit of work, but it seems to be something that works and that students notice. How can you demonstrate empathy in the course? And in doing so, being personable in your interactions with the students. We're people, they're people, we're humans, we make mistakes. How can we let down our guard a little bit and let some of that vulnerability show so that they're more comfortable with us? So let's think back to the question I asked at the beginning, which was, think about that great teacher that you had. You hopefully wrote down a few descriptors of them. Are any of those qualities related to emotional intelligence? And I think, Lida, we could turn the mute off so that people could speak up if they wanted to.
Sure, I'm going to go through and unmute everybody. So please feel free. You all in one moment will have access to your mics. And some great folks on the line. Tamala, Patty, Tanya, Veronica. So please feel free. Alice, Cheryl, Gunjan, Janelle, Josephine. Please feel free to chime in. Alice, I see you're unmuted. And if you are talking, we cannot hear you. You might need to adjust your microphone by selecting one from the little icon that looks like a microphone. And we still cannot hear you. I see Patty is unmuted.
Can you repeat the question?
Going back to the question I asked at the beginning about a great teacher you've had and the characteristics of that great teacher, are any of those related to emotional intelligence? So for example, I had a high school teacher, science teacher, chemistry, physics,
Oh, I'm in now.
Running water,
and
and you
great,
can't like just go to a restaurant because they're without water and electricity too.
so great teacher, but
Mhm.
also very empathetic and caring and asked about me personally,
Yeah.
established that personal relationship. Any comments about a great teacher you've had?
Yeah, thank you.
Alice?
Alice.
Yeah.
Let me let you go because I also need to get stuff
Gunjan, also
done
you're
here.
unmuted.
Let me know if that you're
Okay, I just muted Gunjan. Alice,
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
we
Yes.
can hear you. Welcome.
Okay. When I was doing my doctoral work, of course, everywhere I go, I'm always the oldest one. And Dr. Veronica certainly never made me feel like ashamed of things that I didn't know, say like technology. She always encouraged me. She never once said things like, "Don't you know that? You should know that." I never got that from her, and she was just so great. I felt safe and I felt cared for. And I was like 60 years old then. So
Perfect. Perfect. Anyone else want to share?
You're going to be on your own. Well, I was going to add, I think the characteristic of like kind of like pushing you or challenging you, but still caring and respecting you as an individual. So making you want to do your best. That's a characteristic I can recall from a previous teacher, faculty who I really respected and I think has those um, emotional intelligence characteristics.
Thank you.
Yes, I think when professor cares for you, you can tell just by the way, they're kind with their words and they're taking your mistakes as opportunities for learning and growth. As compared to someone who's coming down on you, oh, this is unacceptable, this is not going to work. So I just think you can just tell by the tone of the professor if they're trying to help you grow or they're trying to use your mistakes to discourage. I mean, I shouldn't use the word use, but if you can just tell if they're being discouraging or encouraging just by the way they're talking to you.
Thank you. I'm glad you said the word kindness because I don't think I said that word in this presentation, but that really is what's a lot of this is about, is being kind to people. Because we're all people, we're all humans, we all make mistakes, we all are uncomfortable or don't know about things. So it's kindness. And I'm finding myself asking about that a lot. Where's the kindness? Not only in teaching, but other dimensions of life.
Thank you. And during my dissertation, it took longer than I had originally expected, but my chair was like, your resilience is to be celebrated. That meant so much to me that instead of, telling me, hey, what's taking you so long? She was like, Kunjan, your resilience is to be celebrated. And I feel small things like that can make such a major impact. Like I know how much it made a difference to me and my dissertation journey that my chair was kind with her words. And of course, we are not going to do their jobs for them. And it can be hard because the professors have so many students too. But I just think that the basic tone can make a major impact on us.
Thank you for sharing. Any other comments? Okay. Well, I think, are there any questions? I think there's some other opportunities for learning about emotional intelligence that's offered by the center. So if you want to learn more, those are listed on the offerings. And as I mentioned, there's lots available online. It sounds like those who already have high emotional intelligence are those who came today. And that tends to happen. So we want to get even better. So I congratulate you for already having high emotional intelligence and wanting to learn more.
Dawn,
Yes.
before we go, may I say this? And I know everyone has to get going. You have things to do. The irony in this is that I had a student right now who has been challenging me and just almost disrespectful. And I needed, so needed, I enrolled today with you at the last minute. When I saw it, I said, oh boy, this I need. And you're right, a lot of times you got to wait and not respond immediately.
Yes.
That's the worst thing you can do because she really hurt my feelings. And then, of course, my lead person, Dr. O'Leary, helped out a lot too.
That's great. Great to
Yes,
hear.
ma'am. Thank
Great
you
to
so
hear.
much, everyone. Thanks, Miss Dawn.
You're welcome. Lida, I'll pass it off to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ford. Great information. And as I put in the chat, you can access past presentations. This presentation, I'll be uploading a link in the area on our OTL website and also into comments. So you can listen to any parts you may have missed. And also any future webinars coming up, please feel free to check out the schedule. We want to thank you, Dr. Ford, for presenting this information, and also just as important, those of you who carved out time to attend. I see some of our postdoctoral fellows on the line. Shout out. Woo-hoo. Love my fellows. They're doing so awesome in the program. And here's a link to claim nursing continuing education credits for those that are in the nursing program. And as always, please feel free to reach out to us at the Office of Teaching and Learning Excellence. We are here to serve your needs, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again, everyone. I hope you have a lovely rest of your respective days.